Technical assistance networks. I'm going to show you a picture in a moment, but we are creating what we call technical assistance networks. Again, external technical assistance networks, the target audience is the industry, and we're going to be partnering with the alliances developing these. They're going to include extension specialists, universities, we have international partners, et cetera, et cetera. So we have the alliances out there creating external technical assistance networks, again, to help the industry comply with the rules. FDA has created a technical assistance network. We call it the TAN. It is to help industry too, but in a different way. It's really to handle rule interpretation questions or where there's gray areas. So we have actually, we set up the technical assistance network. It went live September the 10th when the two preventive control rules published. We've gotten over 50 questions already. Our technical assistance center has a knowledge management system. We basically are loading it with content. You come into and I'll show you some slides that show you what it looks like, but you come in and you fill out a web form. If the content exists, you get directed to the content, and then we don't have to have a human being answering the questions. If the content doesn't exist, then it gets elevated up through kind of a help desk, tier 1, tier 2 structure, and then it will go to subject matter experts if our tier 1 and tier 2 structure can't answer the questions. So right now, the FDA Technical Assistance Network is going to have 2 phases. The first phase is really the rules are coming out. People have questions on the rules. It could be you in the room. And you can go to this web form and you will get answers to your questions. Phase 2 is going to be for the regulator community. That's our goal. So you're out doing inspections and you got questions. And so we want you to have a weigh-in to the agency, and then we'll elevate in the same way, and it's going to have to be more quickly, real time. We understand that. We're trying to figure out how to do that. But just know that the Technical Assistance Center, 2 phases. 1 now, rule interpretation. Later, it's to support the regulator community when you're doing inspections. And this is what it looks like with the picture. In the middle is FDA's Technical Assistance Network. And do know that CBM, CFSAN, and ORA are working really closely. They work very closely to set this up. And OIP, I should mention OIP too. We're developing, we have business protocols around this. They're evolving, honestly. We're working on different things now, disclaimers and time frames and that type of thing. So it's evolving, but that's us in the middle. And we are going to make sure that we are linked to any external technical assistance networks being set up through the alliances or otherwise. What we hope to see is maybe quarterly meetings between us so we can figure out what questions are they getting, what are we getting. And really, the whole purpose of having a knowledge management system that's tracking all these questions coming in is so we can figure out and help us prioritize where guidance is needed, policy isn't clear. When the regulators start using this, if we get the same questions from all the regulators, obviously we missed something in the training. So it can help us refresh our training if we need to. So this is new for the agency. Everybody's used to having their own help desk, email inboxes, that type of thing. So even trying to consolidate all of this has been hard for some people, but I think it's going to be really meaningful in the future. It will help us prioritize our work and even research. Where there's gaps and we need to be doing research. So more to come on that. I think we're going to have a FSMA. Do we have a FSMA chat on this yet? Okay, so we'll be talking more and more about this. Okay, and again, I just went over this. So we did launch it. We're looking at 2 phases. And in the slide deck, you can see how to get into the FSMA Technical Assistance Network and submit your questions. And this is what it looks like, how to contact FDA about FSMA. I'm just going to show you a quick slide set. And I have to put my glasses on, I can't see. Okay, and we are tracking certain things, like I'm a member of a certain category. We do want to know if there's a country involved or if it's somebody from domestically. So these are some of I am a member of categories. We have academia, consumer, media, medical, industry, and then other government, et cetera, et cetera. We really do want to know where we're getting our questions. So again, if there's certain stakeholder groups that don't have something right or we haven't answered a question, we can get that addressed. And then FSMA topics, as the rules come out, we're going to keep adding the rules. Yes.
This is Jenny. Just one thing for people that want to use this web form, if you submit stuff or you tell your constituents to submit stuff, the more detailed the question, the more likely you are to get the answer that you are looking for, as opposed to a very general answer. Based on the first round of stuff, we get like a one-liner question that they want a specific answer to, and we just can't give it to them.
Roberta, can you repeat that? Yeah, repeat the question or comment.
Okay, so what Jenny was saying is that you need to ask your question in detail, or you may not get the response you're really looking for. So don't, if you really have a detailed question, please put the details around the question. Otherwise, you're going to probably get a very general response, and it's probably something that's already sitting out on our web. So the more detailed, the better. Go ahead, Kathy.
Hold on, Kathy. Hold on, I'm coming.
We increased the number of characters in that text box. I think initially we had like 320 characters, and now it's up to 1,000. Just to accommodate what Jenny's saying, is we want the detail to be able to answer the question. And I just want to point out, if we get multiple questions within a query, it gets a case number, but each question is dealt with separately.
Do I have to repeat that? Okay, and again, we do have a web form auto response. So when you issue your question, you are going to get a response from us. So you know we got your query. We think that's only good customer service. We are telling you we'll respond to the inquiry as soon as possible, etc. It really depends on the question. If there is a clear-cut answer, you're going to get your answer quick. If it's a policy issue, it could take us, a while to work through the policy issue. So we're not making any promises you're going to get an answer overnight to really hard technical policy type questions. With that said, we have partnered with our Office of Chief Counsel, and what we do is we transfer any really difficult questions where we need OCC clearance once a week on a Friday, and they have promised to get it back to us the following Friday. So that will give you an idea of the time frames. And of course, if we get the same question over and over again, we will put it through the guidance process, and it will become part of a frequently asked question. So that's the goal. So regulator training. As I mentioned, one of our guiding principles is we're going to invest in regulator training and continuing education. And all of this to promote uniform quality inspections that result in consistent decision making. So some of the things we have been doing, and we hope to continue, we've been doing FSMA chats. We invited the states in a couple months ago to the FSMA chats. Once we got, we started getting final rules and some implementation strategies. We'll continue those. We've had over 20 FSMA chats. So they're on all different kinds of topics. Some are the rules, some are implementation strategies, etc. We have been having webinars on what we're calling industry best practices. This is something the centers need to support and will support in the future. The states have been invited to these as well. We did food safety culture. This is where we're leveraging with industry in a way I've never seen before, because industry is volunteering to put on these webinars. We usually work through GMA to get folks. They come on their own dime to do these for us. We always have the industry perspective, and then we usually close with the FDA perspective from an FDA technical expert. So the webinars we've given so far, we've learned about food safety culture, kind of this whole phenomenon going on out in the industry, what it means to them, how they assess it, that type of thing. It's all about continual improvement, really. First, awareness about food safety, and then continual improvement. We did a chat on environmental monitoring programs, because you're now going to have, the investigators will have access to those records and those programs. You need to know what a good one looks like. So this is something we can do now. We don't have to didn't have to wait for rules. We're doing allergen controls in the near future. That's something else that's changing with the modernized GMPs. And it also falls under hazard analysis and preventive controls in some cases. So it's a little bit complicated. but the industry is willing to come in and talk to us about what a good allergen control program looks like. So this is a way we can leverage with industry. Industry has world-renowned food safety experts. They are willing to come out and talk to us and train us. And so, again, Sifsan and I will say Wes Long sitting at the front table, his staff has been really helping us with the logistics around getting these webinars out. There's several others scheduled. And then, of course, I mentioned the FSMA Alliance courses. We want to support that. Everybody, the regulatory community, food safety staff, participating in those alliances with industries. That's one thing we learned from Seafood HACCP. You know, sitting with industry in those alliance courses was really beneficial. Hearing their questions, hearing how they're being told to comply with the rule. Yes.
Two questions that are related. One, are these chats and webinars being stored up on the web that can be watched later? And secondly, what happens if a foreign regulator or a significant food producing country calls and says, we want to learn more about it? Do they have access to these sorts of things, either industry associations, say from Canada or China or Mexico, or even the regulators, can they access these things?
So the regulators, we do post all of these both on Food Shield, so any commissioned regulator or credentialed regulator can view them at any time, and we store them on the FSMA chats in particular. Are the webinars public? Or they're okay, and we're doing the same things with the webinars right now. And for FDA, they're on the intranet site, so anybody in your posts should be able to get their hands on them. I would say for international partners that maybe have some sort of, you know, I don't know, where's Steve? Confidentiality agreement or something, I would think. I'm not sure what we could do for the international arena.
We'll have to talk to OIP.
Yeah, we'll have to talk to OIP, and you know, they are only in English, so I'm not sure how helpful they would be. But maybe if it's worthy getting them translated, that might. Go ahead.
I just want to add on the regulator.
Just want to add on the regulator training, we've also been working with the animal food industry. So we
Right.
have animal food speakers, and we typically work through NGFA, AFIA, and PFI, and they go and work together to figure out who's going to do it from the animal industry.
And I just wanted to mention the announcement for both the chats and the PC rule readiness training. We do send those out to OIP. OIP sends it to the foreign posts. So it would be for the FDA employees internationally.
Yeah, and I didn't want to exclude the animal food. This year we focused on human food webinars and industry best practice webinars, and next year we expect that we're going to have several around the animal food arena. So thanks. I should also mention that, you know, in the future we really do want to support attendance at industry and association annual meetings for the regulators. You know, I was in ORA for 20 years, and then I've been in Sifsan for the remainder of my time, and I can tell you in ORA, very few, if any, that I remember attended these large annual food industry type meetings, either on the animal or human side. And that's not right. You can get CUEs at those meetings. You can learn a lot about what's going on in the industry, so we need to support that. Regulator training, it's good, you know, we have to consider technical knowledge, inspection skills and knowledge, and then behavior and systems thinking as we're developing those regulator courses. And I do want to mention that we continue, and you're going to see with the preventive controls train the trainer model that we're thinking about, that we want support and mentors for our for our regulators. So we do want to, this mentoring, coaching, we need to build that into how the training programs for our regulators somehow. Okay, inspections, just very quickly, kind of the guiding principles around inspections. It's to gain industry compliance. That's what we're looking for. Not to get an enforcement action, it's to gain industry compliance. And or when they're in non-compliance, to get them to get themselves in compliance as quickly as possible, but in, you know, using the right methods. So sometimes it can't be quick. We're basically saying around inspections, it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach. So don't expect necessarily us compliance programs, following the compliance program, doing the same thing in every type of facility. We really need to look at the risk of that facility, what they're doing there, their compliance history, et cetera, to make a determination on how much time we're going to spend in that facility and what we're going to do in the facility. So looking at a wider range of inspection, sampling, testing data, and collection activities. We do want to consider the firm's food safety culture, compliance history, work of private, public, third parties, again, to establish how often we're going to be in these facilities and the scope of the inspections. So these are our guiding principles around inspections. We're going to do systems-based inspections, not observation-focused. I talked to Joe Levitt, GMA's counsel, legal counsel, and I asked him recently, I said, what is the one thing we could do wrong in developing the inspection and compliance strategies around the preventive controls rules? And he said to continue with this observation-focused type inspection. He said you need to do systems-based inspections. And what that means is you really, when we see non-compliance, we ask questions to determine whether this was an isolated problem, non-compliance, or is it something systemic? Is there something wrong with the program in totality, or somebody just had a bad day and forgot to do something? So this is what they're talking about when, the not observation focused. I think Deb would agree with me that it's going to be very hard to do observation focused for preventive controls because there's over 500 citations. So we really are looking at this differently as we're developing the compliance and enforcement strategy. And I think another thing is with the preventive controls, you tend to forget a little bit because we're caught up in reading the rule. We now have access to records we never had access to. So you will be looking at environmental monitoring programs. You will see that they got hits, because if they didn't, you're probably should be questioning it. And when they get hits, that's okay. Don't put it on a 483. It's your next line of question is this. Okay, you got a positive. Did you do a root cause analysis? What did you find? What did you do to fix the situation? And then you move on from there. So that's just it's just a tweak to the inspection strategy, but we have to think about that. We need to somehow recognize firms for finding and fixing problems. They are setting up programs, they are monitoring, they will find problems, and so really you're not gigging them for finding the problem, you will gig them if they didn't do the right thing after they found the problem. So it's a little bit different mentality here. We are out there saying as a guiding principle we're going to have more interactive. We can't quite come up with the right word. We've used collaborative, cooperative, interactive. I like engaging inspection. So in other words, you want open and constructive dialogue with firm employees during the inspections. So more of that going on. And then I already mentioned that we want investigators and inspectors and center and I would say ORA national experts working together, when they see non-compliance in a facility to get help them get in compliance. So compliance and enforcement, again, we have enforcement tools, new ones under FSMA. FDA itself does not take a lot of enforcement actions, judicial enforcement actions. We took about 20 in FY14. And we issued about 150 warning letters. Bottom line, our investigators are already getting these firms to get themselves in compliance one way or another. I'm not saying we track that information well. We might put it in a narrative report that we can't track and trend, so we're going to do better in that respect. Really what we care about here is you find non-compliance and the firm takes the right steps in the right amount of time to fix that. And if they do that, then we're good. If they don't, then we have enforcement tools and we're going to use them. So again, this is kind of the guiding principles as we're developing compliance and enforcement strategies. We want the industry to make corrections on its own, but we want them to tackle the root cause of the problem. So it's not a quick fix in some cases. It might be a longer term fix. Timely, adequate corrective actions, swift enforcement and corrective action. Basically, we are saying swift enforcement when corrective actions are not forthcoming. Recognition that not all observations are equal relative to risk and potential for public health impact. We are stating very publicly, public health first, regulatory second. So when we're out there doing the inspections, we really have to think about does the area of non-compliance, could it have an impact on public health? And if it does, then that's where we have to do things with more immediacy, particularly on the FDA side. We are thinking about categorizing deviations as critical, major, minor. This is language that the industry uses in the audit world, and we want to link the deviations to public health outcomes. So we have a group of individuals that are really laying out scenarios. If you saw this combination of non-compliance, it could result in a public health impact. We're going to make sure everybody understands when they see those types of situations, we will be doing things differently. In the agency, we are talking about issuing what we call deficiency letters. Our Office of Chief Counsel said we can issue deficiency letters. They are something that the investigators could issue. So it really is probably during an inspection, maybe right after an inspection, that basically says you have a critical deviation that could cause a public health impact. If you don't, you need to get a corrective action plan in place, and if you don't, this is what's going to happen. These are the tools we could use. So more to come on that. That will help FDA quite a bit. We are thinking about a regulatory strategy that is more dynamic, and this is where the states have to play with us. And what we mean by that is in the FDA world, you can have critical, major, minor deviations on a 483 that could basically end up with what we call a VAI, or voluntary action indicated inspection classification. Bottom line is that one critical deviation that doesn't throw it over the top, we should be verifying corrective action, not during the next inspection, which could be 3 years later, but within weeks. So that is what we are talking about, a dynamic regulatory strategy, and this is where we're going to need to figure out how to partner better with our states, because if we had to travel 4 hours to do an inspection and there's a critical deviation and we need to verify corrective action and the state has an inspector there, why can't the state go out, or vice versa? So, talk to Steve a little bit about how we can, this whole flexible funding model, and how maybe contracts don't have to be so rigid, that we could be doing that kind of real-time work planning between the feds and the states. I just want everybody to know that our FSMA Phase 2 work groups have created timelines with swim lanes. You now have it available to you. I'm not going through this. They were told to create implementation strategies around a number of buckets, for lack of a better word. They have done it. We have overlaid the compliance dates on these timelines. You can look at them at your leisure. Just know a lot of planning has gone into this, and we really do have some contract support helping us move through this process. And this is helping us, identify risks. If we don't meet certain deliverables or timeframes, then basically everything forward is going to be delayed in some cases. So I put these in there just for your reference. I want to talk a little bit about the preventive controls training plan. That's always of interest. This plan was approved through senior FDA leadership. There's 2 parts to the plan. The first part of the plan was carried out this year, continues a little bit into first quarter of next year, and that was, we call it the Preventive Controls Rural Readiness Training Plan, and those were the webinars. So these are the webinars we've given and the ones that are planned in the future. What we plan on doing next year, or the next fiscal year, is we want the FDA and state regulators to attend the Food Safety Preventive Controls Alliance courses. So we are hoping to get FSMA money, and we want to support that. And then we need GMP training. We want everybody to get trained up in the modernized GMPs or new GMPs in the animal food arena. So that will be another training event for FY 2016. And then we are going to slowly roll out training for hazard analysis and preventive controls. So more to come on that. We really would like to have a federal, state cadre that would be the first wave to do those types of inspections of the larger facilities. So I don't want to, we're still talking about this, but that is what we're hoping. Maybe 20 on each side. We pair them up, so we actually have, a newbie fed and state investigator. We want experts, really. We want the most expert people. We will have mentors. We're thinking about a mentoring program. So more to come on that. It's basically evolving every day. We had a lunch meeting about it yesterday. But anyway, this plan was approved, and just know that it's federal, state. We have, the whole thing is based around federal and state. These are PC rural readiness training sessions. Again, these are these webinars we've been giving and the ones that are scheduled for the future, so you can, for your purview. We do want for development and delivery of the preventive controls training. Again, this is really just for you to take a look at. We do want to use a train-the-trainer model. We are in the midst of curriculum development for the preventive controls rules. You know, we're trying to figure out how, it's very hard, you have 50 states, it's very hard to figure out how to get the right state representation. And I think for curriculum development, we struggle a little bit because the rule is the rule. And we're gonna have to train around the rule. You know, do we need, how many people do we need? Maybe we need a peer review process at the end, you know, once we have the curriculum developed, which would include some state academics, industry, that type of thing. So more to come on that. The thought is we'll have a train-the-trainer cadre, and they will train a larger instructor cadre. We would like it to be FDA and state. So. We already talked about the technical assistance network for regulators. There is another, we were talking job aid tools yesterday. We are looking at developing a resource library for the regulators. So, and basically, FDA is thinking about building this into our existing database for inspections. So you would, end up, going to a firm, and then for that firm, a resource library would be accessible, which could be videos of the processes that firm or the product that firm handles. So just know I like the whole concept of job aid tools, and we are trying to build that into our implementation strategies. I'm going to talk about OCAR very quickly, but let me do this one first. So this one's a little controversial. For the large firm structure or other firms, the first ones that have to comply with the preventive controls rule for human food, what we have recognized because industry's been very open with us, is they have corporate-wide programs. And their hazard analysis and food safety plan might be corporate-wide. And as well as their recall programs. Their supplier verification programs are usually corporate-wide. To the extent that they showed us, a few of our folks were able to, one of the big companies opened up their books to us, and they said all the supply chain verification is done at the corporate level. The only thing that happens at the facility level is they better see a green check mark on anything coming into that loading dock. And that's all they know about supply chain verification or their supplier management program. No green check mark, this stuff doesn't come in, it's not from an approved supplier. So recognizing this, we want to do a feasibility study on, looking at the corporate-wide programs first, and then designing the inspection strategy at the facility level. So kind of looking at the adequacy of the programs and plans at that corporate level, and then we'll look at implementation at the facility level. More to come on that, partnering with GMA on that, doing a feasibility study. Regulatory strategy for PC, and I'm going to stop after the PC section, not to cut off the produce, but I think that that's what's most important right now. We are thinking about what should go on in FDA 483. The business world is using FDA 483s in a very different way. They're using it to make business decisions. And so we really need to make sure the most critical deviations end up on a 483. So we're talking about that a little bit. Likely a 483 is not going to be, we're not going to be able to use Turbo the way it exists right now, honestly, because we're not going to have 500 sites in Turbo. And so there might be a little bit more narrative around our FDA 483s. We will be ranking violations according to public health outcome, as I mentioned, major, minor, critical. We'll be using that to inform the classification of the inspection, follow-up verification activities, timing for those things. I would also say that there's been talk about if it's a minor deviation and it's corrected during the inspection, perhaps it's not that we're not going to capture it somewhere, but that probably shouldn't be on a 483. So just talk. These are policy decisions. We're just talking around this. And I'm going to end probably with this one. This is the OCAR. Some folks have mentioned this. This is basically a tool for the investigators that, again, to me, will reinforce some of the culture shift and change we want to see. It also should make the investigator's job a little easier. So it basically will help the one-stop shop for preparing for an inspection. So you'll have everything at your fingertips. You'll have that resource library with perhaps videos, compliance programs, assignments. You'll have the compliance history. You'll have recalls. You'll have sample results for FDA. I don't know if you folks know, but you have to go in and out of multiple databases to get recall information, to get sample results. It's in a totally separate database. So we want to tie everything together. The investigator can see everything that's been going electronically, see everything that's been going on with that particular facility, associated assignments, what they need to do when they're going out there. So that's the whole prepare part of it. Then you'll conduct the inspection. We'll have intelligent questionnaires or something similar built in. What's going to be really, it's going to be structured data. The goal, first, some believe, should be that you end up with a report right after the inspection is done. You don't go back to the office and spend 3 days writing a report. With the exception of OAI. You know, OAI throws us in a whole different way, official action indicated. And I will say that a lot of the information collected is around you found non-compliance and corrective actions. So really reinforcing we want to focus on getting corrective actions, gaining industry compliance. So there's a whole, form in there for tracking. We saw non-compliance, did they correct it during an inspection? We are talking about an industry portal as well as a state portal. The industry folks would be able to upload corrective actions. They would be able to see their inspection reports through the portal. No more FMD 145 for us. The portals are actually the easy part of this whole thing, to be honest. There's a lot of work going on around this right now. We'll do the conduct and report. We're talking about a scoring algorithm, perhaps behind the scenes, way down the road, honestly. And really, again, looking for public health indicators. So are some of these facilities just red flags for a public health problem? And making sure that we're capturing those and they're not slipping through the cracks. I can't even give this justice in 2 minutes, honestly, but we probably have 150 people working on this easily. We have probably 10 work groups on the various components. So there's the prepare component, the conduct and report, and we're going to start with preventive controls, but we really would like to apply this to all our food inspections in some date. And then we are working on the portal piece because we know that's very important both to industry and for the state. So we're looking at different portals. This might help us with the information sharing, allowing the states to see the inspections that FDA is doing in their states, that type of thing. So more openness between the states and FDA. And I think we're going to have to close there.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you, Roberta. Very, very good.